Super excited for today's episode, y'all. We have a horsemanship Q&A episode that we're bringing you, and we've got some amazing questions that have been sent in from maybe you, if you're listening and you sent in one of these couple of questions that we're going to be answering today. But the fact of the matter is that we take questions directly from y'all. And so in future Q&A episodes, I like to start this off and just let you know if you have questions about your horses, about your horsemanship that you'd like answered, you can send those to us. You can, if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave them in the comments. I read the comments. We pull questions from those to be able to use for these episodes. You can also email us at office@coltonwoodshorsemanship.com. We have these information in the show notes on the podcast platforms and the show notes on the YouTube platform. And that brings me to the point that you might be listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple or Spotify or some kind of Android. I'm not team Android, nothing against it. I just don't know what the what the options are there. Or you could be listening on YouTube and watching on YouTube as well. So we try to get these episodes out to y'all as many places as possible because I'm a video guy. I love video, but some of y'all are like, you know what? I'm busy. I'm in the barn cleaning stalls, riding horses, and I like to listen to this as I go. I'm a podcast junkie myself, and so I love taking in this information. And so we try to make this accessible to y'all as many places as possible. And these Q&A episodes, whether it's focused on developing your horse businesses, if you have questions about developing yourself so that you can be better for your business, better for your horses, better for your family, better for yourself, because you deserve it too, then you can send those questions to us. And of course, like today, we're answering some horsemanship questions. So I'm super excited to be back with y'all. We're pouring into our media content this year on our YouTube channel, on our podcast, and just bringing you all as much value as possible for the sheer fact that there is a lot of garbage information out there. And I don't spend time tearing other people down, telling why I think all these other people are, necessarily wrong. I certainly, like anybody, have my own opinions, but I'm more focused on bring you guys information that I feel like is high quality information that can actually serve you. It can serve your horse. It can serve your family. It can serve your business. It can serve you all across your life. Because when I got started with the horse in the horse side of things, I was sitting in the barn one day and you have these moments where I believe that ideas float through the universe a little bit and God sends them to us. And I was like, what is this mission? Like, how can I encapsulate what I'm trying to do here? And the words educating horses and people with a lifetime in mind came to me. And that has been tried and true for almost a decade at this point. And so it's the why behind everything that we do is trying to make sure that the information that we do share with you can serve you and your horse for a lifetime in mind. I'm very much a person, and those of y'all that love learning too, you like to learn how to fish. Right. You're not just the people that are like, just give me the fish, give me the fish, give me the fish. It's like, you want to learn how to fish. You want to know why, you want to know how. And that's what my focus is on for y'all too. And so in the way that we do that, we're going to try to keep it fun. We keep it positive, we keep it real, and we keep it informative. So I think that's enough on the introduction side to kind of get you guys revamped, introduce ourselves a little bit to you guys. And if you ever have anytime we have free resources on the episodes, we always plug those down in the comment or down in the show notes below. So anytime you hear me say, hey, you can get a free download or free videos or anything like that, if you're just wondering if there's something free like that, then we always have that available for you all there. So you can always go check out the episode details. But let's go ahead. Let's get into this. All right. Let's get into our first question that was sent to us from Donald. I think this question came from Instagram, if I remember correctly. And this question is, how do you handle a horse that pulls away from you when you are leading them to the pasture? Okay. So this is unfortunately all too common, right? Donald might be leading his horse down to the pasture. Horse is getting excited, going back to food, going back to friends, and gets excited. And the horse has learned to pull away and get away, right? And prevention is 9/10 of the law, right? If I'm throwing out inaccurate statistics, right? Who knows if it's 8/10, 9/10, 10/10, whatever, right? Prevention is key in this instance. And so if I have a horse, and I've had many horses, I've had ponies all the way up to freaking 2,000, 2,500 pound draft horses that have been sent to us that have learned how to get away. Okay. And so how do we actually handle a horse that has learned this behavior and is able to kind of plan their escape on the way to the field, right? It can be dangerous. It can be dangerous for the human. It can be dangerous for the horse. It's something that needs to be dealt with immediately. Okay. And so we have to make sure that how do we prevent this? Well, we got to get prepared. All right. And how do we get prepared and how do our horses get prepared? This is how I break this down. And so, because obviously, if we have a problem, there is a disconnect and we have to identify where the disconnect is. And the best way that I can provide insight as to how we would deal with this is I would tell you exactly what I would do if I had this horse come to me at a clinic, in my training program, anything like that. And what we would end up doing is we would have this horse, we would take this horse to an area where we could work with them. Okay. You might, I don't know what Donald's setup is, but you want to take them either to like a round pen, to a small enclosure pen. You want to take them to an arena, somewhere. Obviously, this horse is going away from the pasture because it's returning to the pasture. Okay. And so you want to take this horse ideally to a place that has a fence around it in the best case scenario, and that has relatively decent footing, whether it's just flat as much as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? It could just be a small pen, a small paddock that is not where that horse lives. And you want to go to like a place where basically we're looking for somewhere we can work this horse. And I predicate all of that because I understand that some of y'all that are listening don't have access to, perfect footing, nice round, like an ideal size round pen or an arena or a cover or anything like that. And so you do the best you can with what you've got, but you take this horse to a place where you can work them. All right. Ideally with a fence, because this horse has learned to get away. The horse could still get away when you're working with them to help prepare this horse better. And you'd rather not have to chase them all around Timbuktu. But we get them up there, and this is where we're going to go into our basic groundwork exercises. Okay. And if a horse has learned to get away, the most common way that they learn to get away is they're walking, let's say, on the right side of the person. And so as the person is standing on the left side of the horse tips their nose away from the person, and they're able to kind of line themselves out and get leverage. And they turn their head away and they just pull and run. All right. And a lot happens when they do that. One, they're able to turn their head and lock their neck a little bit and get their shoulders turned to where it looks like the left shoulder is falling into the human, right? Which is an issue in itself. But also they're able to get their shoulders lined out where they want to go. And then they push with their hind end and off they go. They have leverage, right? They've aligned their body in a way where that is possible. And at the end of the day, I don't care how big you are. A lot of times these horses, once they've made that move, it's hard to get them to come back, right? Because once the mind leaves, the body shall follow. And so we can take this horse and go work on what we would consider our foundational groundwork exercises. Okay. The first one of this is going to be yielding the hindquarters. And some of you guys are gonna be like, if you've listened to any bit of horsemanship, the exercises I'm about to tell you, it's easy for you to put off. Oh my gosh, it's another yielding the hindquarters. It's another one of this exercise. It's another one of this. It's not just what you do, it's how well you do it. And a lot of people misinterpret how well they're actually doing them. Okay. And so your awareness of what is or is not happening is the underlying factor. And so when I tell folks, hey, we need to go work on yielding the horse's hindquarters, we need to teach that horse the fundamental understanding of when we ask them to yield their hindquarters, what do they do? Now, we have a free ebook, and it's called Be a Leader Worth Following. And it has 5 videos that are completely free. And I'm going to link that in this episode so that any of y'all that are wanting to know, like, what are the fundamental foundational groundwork exercises that we use and how do we work with our horses in a way where we're developing that relationship, we're developing the skills and a working partnership at the same time, you can get access to those. Because obviously in a podcast format, it's really hard. I can walk you through these exercises, but you need to go see what they are and how to do them properly, how well they need to be done. All right. Because with a horse like this, we need to be able to yield their hindquarters for the purpose that is the engine. So if the engine starts revving up in the wrong direction, we can redirect that horse's energy and bring their mind back to us. Because a horse that learns to get away going to the pasture, what is actually happening, right? Well, that horse's mind is leaving and the body is following. And at some point, the human is stepping in going, no, don't go away. but it's too late. The mind is too far gone. And so we need to go in and establish some basic fundamentals of being able to get this horse to understand when we ask them to do a particular exercise, that this is how they need to respond. Okay. Once we are, and we do this in a controlled environment, we do this in an area that we can focus on working with. It's like taking a kid and putting them in a classroom. It's a concentrated area with minimal distractions as possible, so the horse can have the best case or the best chance of success in actually learning what they need to learn. Because if we put the horse in an environment where they're nervous, they're scared, they're anxious, they have different types of emotions, they're overly excited, they don't learn that well. So we need to take them to a place away from their friends, and or even with their friends nearby, but somewhere where they can be relaxed and they can be present and they can be focused. That doesn't mean they're going to be perfectly that way when you first get started, but you don't want to be having them having an utter moral meltdown in the most ideal circumstances. So that way they actually retain what you're teaching them. And we teach them the mechanics. Okay. This is how I approach this, is we teach them the mechanics. All right. And what we do with our horses, the exercises that we do with our horses, that teaches them the skills. How we work with them develops the relationship with them, right? So if we go in to do an exercise and you're like Xena Warrior Princess, like just like, tapping them with the lead rope or the stick and doing all these crazy things, like if you're kind of being a jerk about it, you're not building a very good relationship, right? You might get them to do the skill and the horse might oblige and learn the task, but the relationship may not be there. That connection may not be there. And so the way that I approach doing this is yes, you have to know what to do and you have to know what the horse needs to do so that you can release and you can reward the things that we want. But then it's also how you present that to the horse that enables a horse, one, to learn it, but two, to also build the relationship, build that connection. And that's really important when you go to get into higher stressful type situations, is because if this horse goes back to get turned out with its buddies and the horse is a little bit more mentally mindful about the human, they're going to be easier to redirect their mind back. Right. But if the horse has no regard for the human and is like, this person's not important, they haven't told me a damn thing that's worth listening to, they have no reason to listen to the human. And so this is creating a conversation with our horses. So when we go to teach them to yield the hindquarters, when we get them backing up from a distance, when we also get them to yield their shoulders, if we're doing a side pass exercise, like all these are in those videos. Okay. And we want to be able to establish basic control over the horse's hindquarters, their shoulders, their rib cage, be able to direct them forward, back, left, and right, and also their mind. So if you're asking them to circle around you, okay, or if you're just asking them to yield their hindquarters, they need to have their mind on you. That means like their ears, their eye, their head and their neck need to be coming towards you. With a horse like this that has learned to get away, a lot of times when you go to do a groundwork exercise, you go to yield their hindquarters and you add that pressure to move, so let's say the left hip over, a lot of times they'll turn the head to the right. I'd be then bumping that horse's head back my direction, one, so they don't get away, right? Because if you go to tap that horse's hindquarters or just driving energy or pressure with a horse that's looking the opposite direction, you're going to send them that way. That's just what's going to happen, because you're just adding energy to where the mind's going. So sometimes we have to help them maintain focus. And then when we add pressure, add energy, they can then, that energy can be directed in a way that they can be successful. Okay. And so a couple of things, right? We need to go back and get the foundational control of that horse in a halter and lead rope, with the hindquarters, the shoulders, the rib cage, be able to send them forward, back them up from a distance. And the other big thing that I would be very mindful of is that where this horse is at when we lead the horse. Okay. So when I lead my horses, I lead them 1 foot behind me and 1 foot to the side, to the outside of my shoulders. So if that horse is on my right side, that horse is 1 foot behind me and 1 foot to the right. If the horse is on my left side, it's 1 foot behind me and 1 foot to the left. What that allows me to do is I can see the horse out of the peripheral vision because their nose is on that mark. Okay. Not their shoulder, not their barrel, not halfway down their neck. Their nose is placed 1 foot behind me and 1 foot to the outside of my shoulder. Okay. That is where I like my horses to lead because it allows me to see them from behind me. If anything happens, because shit does happen, and they were to shoot forward, they have room to go past me, even though they would know they're not supposed to. Then they have room just in case, because I want them to be mindful enough not to run me over in the best case of circumstances. And the other thing too is with them at that distance, it's like a mare and a foal. The foal is slightly behind the mare, right? Oftentimes, right behind that horse, the mare's shoulders. And they're able to then mirror image. They're able to, if the mare goes to turn to the right, she doesn't just run into the foal, right? The foal's far enough behind the mare that when the mare turns, the foal can adjust their rate of speed, can adjust their balance, and be able to make that turn. Okay. With that horse that's 1 foot behind me and 1 foot to the side, that horse should be able to adjust when I'm changing, if I'm changing directions or changing my pace. They are able to rate my direction, rate my speed. And then when you're training a horse to lead more properly, one of the exercises I teach you guys to do is to back that horse up at a distance. And that means that we end up swinging the lead rope to add driving pressure if the horse doesn't follow them subtle cues. Okay. Well, if the horse is 1 foot behind me and 1 foot to the side, and they start to creep up, they start to get their head to my shoulder or their nose past my shoulder, then at that point, if they are missing the most subtle cues of my hand going up and down, not side to side, don't get me started on that on this episode, but going up and down, and they don't follow that redirection backwards, I can use the end of my lead rope and spin that lead rope to drive their pressure back. Okay, drive their energy and drive even their momentum backwards a little bit so they don't end up in front of me, right? But if your horse is already leading out in front of you, you're already behind, right? You're already late to the party, and you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation that way. And so, a couple of things is like, right, going through, making sure you reestablish the control, making sure that you're leading the horse. If you're asking for my opinion, 1 foot behind you, you're leading that horse 1 foot behind you, 1 foot to the side. And the third thing with this is your level of awareness. Being able to, anytime that horse's mind goes to direct and they start to get overly obsessed, they start to get overly attentive on something, right? If they start to, like this horse, for example, that would be getting away going to the field, I'd be leading this horse by themselves. And if they then started to get mentally wound up and started to act like, oh, I might actually try to get away to get to my friends faster, I'd be using these exact groundwork exercises, yielding the hindquarters, sitting the shoulders, the half circle exercise, backing that horse up. Right? I'd be doing all of these things as part of my lead. We're still going to get where we need to go, but we're going to use these groundwork exercises as our means to get to the field, because it's not just about getting to the field, it's how we get to the field. And I tell people that work for me, and I've had this conversation with my wife, I've had this conversation with assistants, with working students, all these people. If you cannot lead 2 horses with quality, then you have to lead 1 horse at a time. And they're like, well, that takes too much time. It's like, then it takes more time, right? But if many times we just need to lead that 1 horse by themselves, that way we have our hands available to be able to redirect them. That way we can be focused. Like, don't be leading your damn horses while you're texting on your phone, right? These horses know when we're paying attention, when we're connected with them, and we need to be right there with them. And so if we start to see that horse's mind drift to their buddies, and say we just change our body position, maybe we shift the weight in our feet, and that brings that horse's mind back, great. But if we do that and the horse doesn't respond, or maybe we bump them on the lead rope and bump their nose, and then they're still looking off to their friends, maybe I need to slow my feet down, step around, and yield that horse's hindquarters and really get their mind back. Okay. This situation, and I should have let off with this, is probably this horse getting away going to the field is not just an issue of the horse going to the field. This is a problem with the quality of leading and the horse's level of attention and being able to stay focused on the handler. And oftentimes then we have to look at, well, if the horse is not staying focused on the handler, how much is the handler focused on the horse, right? And some of us might be focused on the horse in a nervous way, like, oh my gosh, I don't want him to get away. But you're the leader, right? Which is why we have that ebook, Be a Leader with Following, right? Because we want our horses to have enough confidence and trust and understanding in us that we can lead them, we can guide them, we can take them into good situations, we can guide them through tough situations, but we are someone worth following. And if a horse is having a hard time maintaining focus on the person, then we have to look at the person that's handling the horse and going, hey, are we being aware enough? Are we seeing the subtle changes in that horse and being able to step in and provide guidance, right? Provide guidance that builds confidence if the horse gets nervous, if the horse starts to have a bad idea, right? Not every idea that a horse has is a great idea, right? Getting away. And we can understand why the horse might think that way, but that doesn't make it a good idea. Okay. We can step in and redirect that horse, provide that horse some guidance, and let that horse understand that is outside of the standard operating procedures, right? That's not how we go to the field. We don't just turn you loose, right? I've had horses that have come to us that they've come from farms where they just open stall doors, the horses walk in, they feed the horses, they shut the stalls and let the horses out. They just open the stall doors and they open up into a field. So the horses just learn to walk in and out of stalls, but they're never like caught in stalls. They're not let out of stalls in a halter that regularly. And these horses can be kind of pushy or come across as pushy when you first get them into like a training environment and you're like, you go to open that stall door and they go to walk out and you're like, whoa, 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 what the hell is going on? Right. And yet we can understand from the horse's perspective, this has just been their life. That's just how they've been handled. But then we have to reestablish like, nope. So we might walk into that stall, slip through, shut it behind us, and then get that horse caught and then have to use that backing up at a distance exercise. Because when we go to open that stall door to walk out, they might try to walk past us because they're not used to having to be mindful of a person. They're in a pattern. They're in what they know to do, which is just to walk out of that stall. And what we would have done is caught that horse, dealt with it, and then got them into the arena, got them into the round pen, and then start to teach them those fundamentals. That way, when we use them in our daily handling, that the horse understands it and the horse can do something with it. Okay. And so much of this comes down to these groundwork exercises that I teach people at clinics that we have in our video library that I teach. They're not just exercises to go do in the arena. They're how you handle your horse on a daily basis. And I'm so keen on this. Like I ride people's asses all the time because if you start to let things slip in your daily handling, it's going to show up in multiplied fashions down the road. So your level of awareness of when you're handling your horse on the ground, where that horse's mind at, where that horse's emotions are at, where that horse's body is at, is so freaking important because it affects everything else. And if you can, and for us, right, if we have bigger aspirations of riding our horses, we need to be able to make sure that we have aspirations of building our awareness with our horses on the ground. Okay. So we've gotten tactical. I'm not going to go any further into that because we've got the exercises. I've got resources for you guys below, but taking the big picture of like, this is how we handle you have to look at how you handle that horse on an everyday basis. And it's going to start with making sure like, let's pay more attention to our horse. Okay. Let's pay more attention to the horse when we handle the horse. Let's try to notice when the horse's mind drifts sooner. Let's notice when the emotions escalate sooner. Let's notice when that horse's body gets aligned, gets in a position that's not ideal sooner. But then also take the time to have teaching sessions, educational sessions with that horse. So that horse does have an understanding of that horse. Because if the horse doesn't have an understanding, it's really hard to correct one, right? You can't correct a horse that doesn't truly understand, right? Now, you might have to get a job done. When the horse tries to get away, if that horse doesn't have understanding, it's about getting that horse stopped because we don't want that horse to get hurt. So they may not understand it, but you can still be fair about it, even if you're super firm, right? You might have to get really firm. I remember this big ass draft horse that came into training. Like he was well over 2,000 pounds and had learned to get away. Right. There was times where we had to get really firm on that horse because he was so big and he knew it. He had I had videos of him dragging people around. Right. He not just learned to pull people. He learned to drag like 200 pounds of human around. So we had to get fairly firm with that horse from time to time to make sure that the physical redirection connected with the mental redirection. Right. And so there's times where you just got to get it done. And then when the horse does what we need them to do, then you give them that moment to go, hey, I'm here for you. Like when they mentally come back, that you're in a good place. And that brings me to just a really quick point on this is that, when we get firm with a horse, it doesn't matter whether you're riding horses or you're working with horses on the ground. When you get firm with horses, that if we get mentally upset and say you really get into them, you get to spanking on them or chasing them around, and you're like, oh my gosh, why won't you just do it? Right? I think every human that's worked with a horse has had this moment before, right? I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it's not a good idea, right? But we get really firm. And then when that horse clocks back in and they come back and we're still mad and angry and frustrated and like maybe cussing a little bit, that horse comes back and they're like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, and then they see someone and they're like, how can they trust someone that's emotional, that's not disciplined, that's upset, that's directing bad energy at the horse? How can that horse then go, you're somebody worth following, you're somebody worth listening to? No, they're gonna be like, I'm a herd animal. I need a steady Eddie leader that is confident, that is poised, that doesn't get emotionally upset that frequently, right? I mean, they need someone that they can rely on in their herd dynamic. And that's so important, that we can get firm with a horse. We can get firm with a horse, but it's how we go about doing it. We get firm, and then we help that horse make the change that they need that we need them to make for their own mental, physical, emotional, or overall well-being benefit. And when that horse comes around and they clock in and they look at you and they're like, oh, okay, like that was different, or I, I, I think I got it. And they all have a little different reaction, right? But then they start to settle. And when they can connect with you, that you're in a good place mentally and emotionally, you're like, I'm there for you. I got you. I got you. Hey, you're good. I got you. Right. If you're able to project that energy towards a horse, especially after a moment where they got flustered, they got mentally disorganized or upset, they got emotional, or they got physically out of balance, and they're having a tough time. And then they finally come around and the emotions settle, the physical elements start to find better balance, the mental focus starts to come back. And when they clock back in and you're in a good place, then you're a leader that they can look to. They can go, oh, I can seek guidance in this human. I can trust this human because I just went through this little tough moment. And when I came back and I got more mentally present, this person was here for me. And that's so important, right? Because some of the best relationships that any of us have, guess what? They're not formed in just great times, where the best relationships aren't always good, right? Some of the best, strongest relationships are those relationships that you've gone through moments of tough times with, whether that's with your husband, with your wife, with friends that you've had for a long time, you've had deep experiences with, because that have been tough, that have been challenging, that maybe have at times gotten you mad at each other, but then you've been able to work through your differences. You've been able to communicate. You've been able to showcase that you are there for them in the good times and in the bad times. Those relationships are the strongest ones. And that's why there's this freaking fad going on about like, I'm for relationship before horsemanship, or I'm for horsemanship before relationships. And I think it's a bunch of garbage. To be frankly honest with you, because I think that the strongest way to develop skills in a relationship in our human lives, with human to human interactions, or even with horses, is by doing them together, right? Focus on what we do together gets results, right? It develops skills with our horses. When we focus on what we're doing, it's working a cow, working on jumping, working on dressage, working on groundwork, right? Whatever it is, what we do develops skill sets in those specific areas that we're spending our time focusing on. And then how we work together develops the relationship. Okay. And the better that both get, when we utilize the opportunity of spending time working together on something that actually has purpose and meaning and is valuable and interesting to the both of us, and then we do it in a way that benefits us and our horses mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, everything gets better together, right? It should not be separate, because there's never a time with horses or in our own lives where we just need skills or we just need a relationship. When we're dealing with other beings, right? The best way forward when we're working with each other, when we're working with our spouse, when we're working with our colleagues, when we're working with our friends, when we're working with our horses, is that we work together towards that common goal, and we do it in a way that is able to bring us both up. That is, we're able to rise together, right? I that is my opinion on this with our horses. It's how I've approached working with some of the most difficult problem horses that exist. And it's really taught me that, hey, from a professional standpoint, I haven't had time to go just develop a relationship or just develop skills. Because if I just develop skills, it's superficial. It's not deep enough. It doesn't get into the emotional development, the mental development with that horse, right? And so in order for that education to really run deep, we have to get into the mental and the emotional and even the spiritual side of things with these horses, which means that we're developing a connection, but we're also building their understanding that humans are good. Humans can be there for them, right? Because all these troubled horses that I've worked with, they've been let down by people. And so we're able to do that together. And from a training standpoint, when I was running a barn primarily completely focused on troubled horses, that was the thing that we had to do. We had to teach them the skills. We had to give them the understanding. But then we had to showcase to them, like, hey, there's the emotional, the mental focus, the mental understanding, the emotional fitness, the physical fitness, the spiritual aspects of this, that this horse can take this education and take it with them into the future, right? Because they weren't going to stay in my barn forever. I feel like it's the same thing with our kids. It's the same thing with our other human relationships, is that we all have to develop skill sets, right? In our horsemanship, in our career fields, whatever it is, that make us we're useful to society, right? We're able to capitalize on these skill sets that we do have, but then we need to be able to do it in a way that serves us in fulfillment, right? It can achieve success, but it's also fulfilling, and it serves us and it serves other people in a meaningful and impactful way, in a real way, right? Not just some highfalutin makes us feel good. Like, it really has to make a difference. And so I'm going to end on that with that particular question, because that certainly took us down a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I like to follow those because I always hope that it brings value to somebody. So any point, that if you're listening to this or watching this somewhere and something connects with you, I always love to hear what your takeaways are, what connects with you, what was meaningful to you, what was helpful for you. And you can always send us an email, or you can drop it in the comments, or if you leave a review, you can let us know. It's a little bit of the fuel that keeps this thing going. Right. A lot of times when I do these, I'm sometimes by myself and I'm talking to a computer screen or to a camcorder, and it's always good to hear from y'all. So I just want to throw that out there. Anytime you hear something that resonates, I really appreciate hearing from you guys. And so let's get into the second question. All right, let's get into the second one here. And so the second question comes from Tori, and I've got four pieces here that four breakdowns for her question and the answers, because her question was really good. I know this is going to touch a lot of people that are out there. And so Tori's question is, hey, what advice do you have to a green rider attempting to train a green broke horse? I can hear it. A lot of you guys are smiling, right? As you heard that question, you're like, oh, this is going to get good, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, some of you guys might have got chills. You're like, oh my gosh, here we go. Green rider, green broke horse. What's the most common phrase that we have to say about a green rider and a green broke horse, right? Green and green makes black and blue. Okay, I mean, I'll throw this out there. We're not going to leave it at that. That's not part of my four uh, pieces of value, things that came to mind that I wanted to share with Tori and anyone else that might be in this situation. This is great for adults that maybe are getting back into horses. They're like, I'm a little rusty, right? I'm a little rusty on my skills, and I got this green horse, and we're going to learn together. This could be for parents that their kids are getting into horses. Oh, and I'm gonna give them this horse. He's not completely trained, but I think they can figure it out together, right? Probably not the best idea either, right? If you're a green rider, green horses are not always the best choice. Not always, right? I'm not saying that they aren't, because at one point I was green, working with a lot of green horses. I learned a lot of my skill sets from the back of green horses, but it wasn't the green horses that kept me safe. It was the people around me that kept me safe. Okay. And we're going to talk about this. I'm going to fuel up on some coffee here for a second. All right. So the first thing is, Tori sent in this question, right? Advice for a green rider with a green broke horse. I want to acknowledge Tori and compliment you for your own self-awareness, because you flat out said, "Hey, I'm green and this horse is green." And I want to compliment you on that because you're willing to admit that. You're honest, you're objective, you're looking at the situation for what it is. And one of the biggest things that holds people back in anything, that it holds people back in their ability to actually get better, to develop higher level skills. It also holds people back and can get them really seriously hurt, is when they think that they are more advanced than they really are, or when they think that their horse is more advanced than they really are. Right. So much of the trouble that I run into when I teach clinics all around the country is people will tell me, like, "Hey, I want help doing this particular exercise or be able to do this with my horse." And when I get to objectively look, because I'm not emotionally tied to either one of them, right? I want to help them both, the horse and the human. But when I can objectively look at, like, let's see where you're at. And I'm like, oh man, we're missing a lot of basics, or we're missing a few key ingredients. And guess what? I have to be the one that says, we're going to work on these things. Because if you don't get this working and you're working with you and your horse, what you want to do won't happen. Right. And I was like, and I'll tell them, like, if some other trainer tries to tell you they will, either they're much better than me and so be it, go follow them, or they're just telling you what you want to hear. And so you'll keep paying them, and they're just going to bypass the important part. And what you're going to get is a really crappy result. And you're probably going to get frustrated and upset, and it's not going to be quality. And so if you come to me, we're going to do this the right way. It's not the fastest way, but we're going to do this with quality. And we're not going to leave any rock and stone unturned. Okay. And so that's super important. That's a little bit of like, hey, if you're looking for an instructor, right, you need to find someone that is, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, a little bit in my notes, but that's what happens, right? Because this is so connected, is that fact that one of the biggest things, and it happens for professionals and it happens to recreational riders and amateurs, it happens to all of us, is that we start to think that we're further ahead than we are. And that's when safety can get jeopardized. That's when we can get really held back. It's really important that we objectively and humbly go, this is where I'm at, this is where my horse is at. And then we have to do step number 2. Okay. Point number 2. My first point was, sorry, I want to compliment you. Like, it takes massive self-awareness and willingness to say, I don't care to admit that I'm not as far along as I'd like to be, but I want to get the help that I need. And I want to get the help for me for my horse. So the second thing, and I think this is the best option, when you're a green rider with a green horse, the best option that I believe you can do is you can go get help. Okay. Is to get help. And I mean, get help from a professional that has proven results and experience getting the results that you want with your horse. Okay. And we'll talk about a couple of different ways that you can arrange that, but the best option is to go get help. So if you have a green horse, you need someone that understands how to actually educate green horses. Okay. That might be finding someone that has experience starting colts or doing foundation processes with horses. And then you might be able to, if you find the right person and you're a dressage rider, then you might be able to find someone that's really good developing young dressage horses. Then they can handle the green horse part, and they can steer that horse's education towards the bigger goal that you have, which might be dressage. Okay. If you're a trail rider, same thing. If you're a cow horse person or a ranch riding person, same thing, right? Find someone with that young horse, green horse experience, because that foundation is so critical. That's why our entire program is like educating horses and people with a lifetime in mind. That foundation will serve that horse for the rest of that horse's life. And it is one of the most beneficial, most important, most impactful investments that we make as horse people in our young horses. And it doesn't have to be a young horse. It's a horse that does not have a foundation, right? One of the oldest horses that I've started, he was 19, right? It was a 19-year-old stallion that came into my program. Okay. That's a story for another time, but that horse was still a green horse. He wasn't a young horse, but he was not ridden. He did not have that education. He was a green horse. And for the years that horse had left, that foundation was going to serve that horse and that owner. And so you want to make sure that you go find the very best help that you possibly can. And then you can arrange that in several ways. If you're like, hey, you have to look at the amount of time that you have. You have to look at the amount of money or investment that you're willing to make, because sometimes it might make most sense to hire a trainer to work with that horse 5 and 6 days a week to help advance that horse's education. It's the fastest way for that horse to develop. But then us as the person still has to put the time in. You got to go out there and take lessons once the horse is far enough along. Or you might be thinking, and Tori, this might be your case, and it might be someone else's, where you're like, you know what? I don't necessarily want to put the horse in training, but I want to take, I want the professional to teach me how to do this, right? And that might mean that you haul the horse in, to that person's facility, and you take regular lessons, and then you're working with the horse in between lessons. I've had a lot of students that do that. Or you take the horse, leave the horse at that person's facility, and you know, and maybe they're training the horse and you're taking regular lessons. And the thing is, you have to look at, I need the horse to advance, and I need myself to advance. And you need to find an arrangement to make that happen. Some folks, the best answer is horse in training and I come take lessons. And then once the horse is to a point in their training where the horse doesn't need to necessarily be in training, then I come back and I take regular lessons, like really regularly, because I, as the human, have a lot to learn, right? Other situations are, you work with your horse at home, you haul the horse to lessons, or a trainer comes to you and teaches you lessons. It's all about making sure that you find the right professional to help you get to the goals that you have, right? And you obviously have two components. You got to develop the horse, and you got to develop yourself. You can have the horse develop on their own, and then you develop yourself on your own through lessons, or you can do it together where you train the horse and you have the professional train you. That's going to take a lot longer. However, you're going to go through the process, right? And so at the end of the day, the best investments that we can ever make are in our horse's education and in our own education. And when it comes to green and green, rider and horses, one of the very best option is that we get help from professionals that can really help us, that can help our horses, that can keep you safe, that can communicate clearly, right? So when it comes to finding a trainer or an educator that can help you as the human, you got to find someone that can teach. You got to find someone that has similar morals and similar values, and that they can actually communicate what they're doing and how they're doing, and that they can adjust to fit you, and they can adjust to help explain things, right? That means they need to have like 25 different analogies for everything in their back pocket. You don't necessarily need to do that as a vetting question of like, how many analogies do you have for this? Because I don't know that the first 19 are going to help me, right? But the thing is that they need to be able to communicate, right? They need to be able to adjust to fit you so that you can get the result. And there's a lot of great professionals that are out there. Okay. So the third point here is, if it's absolutely not possible, right? Which is very, 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 very rare. Basically, usually when we get to this point, people are just making excuses. But if it's absolutely not possible, to work with a professional, okay? If you, for whatever reason, if someone's just saying like, there is no professional for me to work with, and or there's no one I can haul my horse to, like, it's probably not true. Because here's the honest thing: you just need someone that's a couple rungs ahead of you. They may not be as good as you'd like them to be, but if they can teach you something, it might be worth it, right? It very well could be worth it. And so, but if someone is sitting here listening to this and they're like, I'm in the same position, but there's no one to take my horse to. It's like, I'm going to tell you again, like, go look, go ask people, go ask your vet, go ask all kinds of people. There probably is somebody. But if someone has just got it made up in their mind that there's absolutely no one around them to help them, then go get the best information possible. Okay. And in today's world, it's information overload. It's almost overwhelming how much information is available to us in horsemanship and personal fitness, like anything. There's so much information available to us at our fingertips right now. And and a lot of it's phenomenal. Now you have to have some discernment, because there's a lot of bullshit garbage out there too. Okay. There's a lot of people that are like, I'm going to teach you how to have fun with your horse. And if you really know what you're looking at, their horses are stressed out as hell, you know. Or if you really know what you're looking at, they're telling you, oh, this horse has never done a flying lead change. And you look at the horse and you watch them execute, and you're like, hell yeah, that horse has done a lot of flying lead changes, right? There's some people out there that are just full of it, right? We have to, maybe I'll do another episode on how to see through that. Because there's a lot of people that are full of it. They're not in it for the right reasons. And, even if they were in for the right reasons, they're lying through their teeth and some of this stuff. So when you go to find good information, you can find a lot of free information. whether that's via podcast, via YouTube, those types of things. And then a lot of us, myself included, and a lot of horsemen have condensed a lot of very valuable information into our video libraries, right? And it's full of direct step-by-step training opportunities, right? So like I can't really speak to a whole lot of others, but like ours, we have Groundwork series, we have Young Horse series, we have Foundation Ridden series, and we have a philosophy and approach sections, and it's very in daily handling and care. But a lot of this information is available for a very affordable price. And sometimes it's free, and other times it's 20, 50, $100 a month, right? Depending on what people are charging. And that is the next best option. And it, to me, the best option with that information is to use it as a supplement, right? When you when you're working out, for example, you can take your multivitamins and you can make sure you're eating correctly and those something as a supplement to actually working out, right? But you can't expect to just take the information or take the vitamins and expect that to do the work for you, right? No, you still got to go work with your horse and do those things. And even if you have a professional that you're working with, there's nothing wrong with learning from other programs and having access to these video libraries as supplemental information to help you continue developing your own education, right? But if you're in this situation saying there's no professional around me that can help me, then go get access to really good information and go look through YouTube if you're trying to find it for free. If you're willing to pay 20, 50, $100 a month, whatever, then you can get into people's video libraries where they've spent decades promoting, or sorry, decades developing their skills and be able to condense it into videos that you can literally take what they've learned over the course of decades and be able to learn it very quickly. You still got to go put the work in, right? You still got to go do the workout to actually develop the feel and the timing and the balance and those sorts of things. But now you have access to the direct information that some people pandered and like they just tried to figure it out, right? For decades. And that's amazing, right? We're in a really, really phenomenal time right now where we've got access to this information and we got to sort through the garbage, but then we can take this really good information and really excel ourselves to benefit our horses. I mean, it's absolutely remarkable. It's remarkable. So the fourth thing here, y'all, Tori, and the last thing I'm going to say on this is take your time with your horse, but do not dwell. Okay. What I mean by that is take your time to do it right. You have a green horse, and when you have a green horse, you're not in a rush, right? There is no rush. You do not want to rush the foundation. But when I say do not dwell, I mean, do not bore your horse to death until they resent you. Okay. Do not bore your horse until they just flat out resent you. You're like, oh my gosh, we have to do this freaking groundwork again. Right. We got to move on. Okay. You want to teach them what they need to know to develop that solid foundation. You want to take the time that it takes. But so often we overestimate how much time it takes. It's sometimes the less you know, the slower you go. Okay. And when you're green, go slow. Surround yourself with a professional. Take the time it takes. Okay. But many times what I see is that us as the human, we need more time. We need more practice to develop our skills than our horses do. So many times we need extra practice and we need extra time doing these particular exercises. And in the process, we are just pissing our horses off because they're the ones that have to deal with our constant repetition of exercises and trying things. And they're like, oh my God, I got it already. Would you leave me the hell alone? And the best way to avoid those circumstances, because we want to develop that relationship with that horse and keep things positive and keep them enjoying their work, is that if you feel like you get to a point where you need extra practice and you don't want your horse to resent the work that you're asking them to do, go find other horses to work with. Okay. Don't keep torturing your own horse. Okay. That is so important. And that means that you can do that by paying to take lessons with a professional that has horses that you can ride, right? It's really beneficial to do that because now you get to practice your same skill set with multiple different types of horses that move differently, that feel differently, that think differently. And you still get to work on developing the core fundamental skills that you need, but now you get more variety of experience versus just doing it on one horse. And I see that I see it with professionals, I see it with recreational riders, with adult show amateurs as well, to where they're like, I need to get better at, like, we need to get better at this. It's like, no, you as the human need to get better at this. Your horse has got it. Your horse is fine. Leave them the hell alone before you just flat out piss them off and they don't want to do anything for you. Right. And so in order to do that, we have to be aware of like, okay, that's enough is enough. My horse has got it. I need more practice. So go work with other horses. This is why, like in our professional horseman school, every student works with 2 horses because they can practice with one horse multiple times, and then they can stop and go get more practice with their other horse, so that way they don't piss either one of them off, and they can go back and forth between the 2 of them, and those horses don't build up that resentment, right? It's really important. You may not own 2 horses, but there are multiple horses out there that you can get access to by paying for lessons, asking friends, whatever the case is, whatever works for your situation. All right. And so that's my wrap there for Tori on advice for a green rider and a green broke horse. I always want to take my time doing this for you guys because there's a lot of information that I want to share with you based on the years of experience in helping people just like y'all. And I'm always very cognizant. I hate to, one of my biggest fears is putting out information that's not complete. And I know that we're always adding to it. It's why we're always able to create, we don't just create one big video that says everything, but making sure that when I answer these questions, that I answer them in depth, which means that I know it's not for everybody if you're just looking for an answer in 35 seconds. But I want to take the time to answer these questions in depth because this impacts you directly. Like this impacts your horses, it impacts your life, it impacts your ability to stay safe and not just like have a better relationship, but like actually not die. And so I always want to take my time to explain these things so that way I do my best to give you as much well-rounded information that you can take and actually go be successful with. Because I find a lot of professionals, they like to tell you about the frosting on top of the cake, but they don't actually tell you, about the ingredients that you need and the quality of the ingredients that you need. And then you wonder why the cake didn't rise. You wonder why your horse didn't do the thing that they said your horse would do if you just did the 3 simple steps, right? Horse training, a lot of this stuff is very simple, but it doesn't make it easy. And a lot of times we can be doing what we need to do, but it's how well we need to do it, how well or what level of quality the ingredients are that we go into, right? Just like baking a cake or doing a flying lead change. And even we got a performance horse question coming up here that is going to benefit. I don't care what discipline you're doing. This is going to be applicable for you to get your horses working well for you and using themselves properly. Because I've had this exact same issue with one of my horses. So I'm going to be able to speak personally about this to answer this question next. But just making sure that I'm giving you as much well-rounded information that you can take and go use. All right. And that you feel prepared and that I feel confident that I'm like, okay, I did my best in answering that for you. And I didn't leave anything out. Okay. That's really important for me because I don't want to. I don't want you to only get 4 of the 5 things and the 5th thing that I don't tell you, because I think some people don't tell you on purpose, then it leaves you in a bad position. Okay. It could get you hurt. It could make you lose money. It could get your horse lamed up, whatever the case is. It's not worth it. Okay. So last question, y'all, is from Double Three Ranch. Okay. I got this question in. I didn't know what this guy's name was. So Double Three Ranch, I think this question came from TikTok. And so I'm going to read exactly his message to me here, and then we're going to get into the answering. Okay. So he said, "Morning, man. I have a question. I was watching your video on correction bits, and I've used quite a lot of bits on this particular horse, trying to learn how they work and trying to find which one I need for where my horse is at. Just riding around, she cues the same in most bits. However, I'm having an issue keeping her soft in the bit when I go to full contact. So he's healing. That's the context that he provided here. And so what he's meaning there when he goes to full contact is when he goes to heel, a lot of times they'll pick their hand up and get that horse on a contact. And there's a biomechanical reason for it. and they'll go to pick up to get that horse soft, so that when they go to heel and they sit down and they go to sit down and dally, that horse will, some horses will slide or they'll at least stop. Okay. But that horse is going to go to a stop once that guy goes to heel and he's dropped his loop and he starts to pull his slack. And as he goes to dally, so they'll pick their hand up on that horse. So also, right, because if he picks his hand up, that horse can change their point of balance and start to adjust their weight from a full-on canter where they're catching up to a steer to then be able to pick up to readjust that horse's balance, and then they can get that steer stopped. Okay. And so he's having trouble keeping her soft in the bit when he goes to full contact. And he says, so do you think that this is just an issue of softness at a higher speed or energy, or could I move to a correction for more cue? And he goes, a currently rider in the perfect bit, which is a slow twist French link with ball joints on a shank. Okay, that sounds complicated. Slow twist French link with ball joints on the sides on the shank. Okay, so it's not. It's like a French link kind of snaffle, almost like a Tom Thumb, but it's a French link with a slow twist and a shank. So it's actually not even that crazy of a bit. Okay, and so some of you guys could think about a snaffle that's a slow twist with a French link 3-piece. Okay, and that's just got shanks on it. All right. And so he says, I'm just trying to figure out how to get this horse to stay round when I'm roping on her and can't use two hands when she's pushing in a run. And he can't use two hands because he's got his reins and his coils in one hand, and he's got his loop in his other hand, right? So he said, I made mistakes when first starting to train this horse in the stop. So I'm going back with what I know now and trying to fix the holes in her. She's not always bad in a run, but I'm having a hell of a time getting her to work consistently. A good run here and there, but ain't enough to stay in the money window, right? And so I've made this same mistake. Okay, I made this same mistake early on with my horses. And one, the fact of the matter is, like, hey, I'm going back to kind of refill in some of these holes, right? That's of course, like we talked about earlier about being prepared. And that's a big piece of this, is actually getting these horses prepared so that way they have the right fundamentals in there. Okay. But I want to get into the performance biomechanics and even what I'd be looking at to help this horse be more prepared, so that when he does go to pick up on a full contact within, because a lot of times these healers, they'll be running wide open with their hands down, letting that horse be on a loose rein, and then they'll go to draw that horse back as they're dropping their loop and dallying and getting that steer stopped. And so they're going from wide open on a loose rein to really drawing them back sometimes. And this particular horse, right, is having issues when he's taken hold of her, right? And so crux of his question is, would a correction help? The correction certainly could help, but I want to get to, he said that she rides similarly in a lot of different bits. Okay. And so I want to get back to like the horse development side of this, because there are certain bits that can help that certain horses like better, and they can help a horse perform better. Okay. There's no naivety to that. Okay. And so we obviously want to find a bit that helps that horse operate at their best. That being said, when he's saying that, hey, this horse operates pretty similarly in a lot of different bits, then I would be going back to that horse's education. How does that horse think about the contact? Okay. And so this would be the challenge. This would be the thing that if I was teaching him in a lesson with this horse, or if I was watching a video, that I'd be looking for. And you could basically run a science experiment, and you could try this with multiple different bits just to see, right? Does a certain bit help this mare, or is it more of a mental thing, or a little bit of both, right? And so what I would be looking at is, and what I want with my horse, and I do this with my horses in the groundwork, and how I handle them every single day. And I do this on their back when we're riding them in a snaffle or a hackamore, or even if we're moving them up into a leverage bit, whether it's a correction or a spade, anything like that, right? It's not just what we're using, it's how we're using, it's how our horses are thinking about our equipment. It's the same thing that goes for our leg, our spur, a crop, anything like that. And what I'd be looking for in this mare would be, what is her thought process when you take a contact on the reins through the bit. Okay. So when you go from that horse not having a contact, the reins being draped, and there's not any kind of signal, any kind of cue in your hand communicating through the bit to your horse, and you go to start to draw and you start to take the slack out of those reins, and she starts to feel the change in whatever bit she's riding in, what is her thought process in that? Okay. And so the first question would be, when she does start to think about the bit, at whatever point, it could be some horses that are really light, really soft. They'll think about the bit when they feel the reins get the drape come out of the reins. When they feel the slack come out of the reins, that's when that horse will start to think about the bit and about what they need to do. Right. But I don't care when it happens. I don't care if it's off the drape of the rein or if it's when you're really pulling on the bit. Right. When the bit causes the horse to have a thought, what is that thought? Okay. And the second part of that would be, at what point does the horse start to think about the request that you're making, right? Does the horse respond off the drape of the rein, or does the horse respond off of just a full on pulling contact, or it's probably somewhere in between, right? But I'm just trying to use the lower and the upper limits as an example here of when that horse how much do we have to do before that horse starts to think about what the bit is communicating to them. Because here's what I see a lot of times is, some horses, and it doesn't feel like it in this particular question, but some people use the bit as like a stop, right? Like, no, don't do that. They'll take a hold of the reins when the horse is going to the right, but they want them to go like, no, don't go to the right, go to the left. Don't go to the left, go to the right. Hey, don't walk forward, go backwards, right? They use the bit as a control device to say, don't do this, do this, don't do this. And the horse is like, oh my God, this thing, every time they use this freaking bit, all it is telling me what to do. It's not telling me, it's just like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't. Guess what happens? Horses don't like that, right? My ideal situation with my horses, when it comes to contact, when it comes to physical pressure, right? And I already said this, whether it's through a leg aid, through a rein aid, through the bit, whatever it is, right? Any kind of aid that we have, is that I want my horses, if they had thumbs and they had a pen and paper, that they would actually go, the first, it helps me focus. So when they feel a contact on the bit, that the horse goes, well, the first thing I need to do when I feel contact on the bit is I need to focus. And then the second thing that the bit helps me do is it helps me relax. The third thing that it helps me do is it helps me understand what I need to do. And the fourth thing that it helps me do is it helps me get into the proper balance. Okay. Focus, relax, understand, balance. Focus, relax, understand, and balance. That is my ideal 4-step definition. If my horse could write it in a pen and paper for me, they would say, hey, when Colton takes the reins takes the slack out of his reins, and I start to feel a change in the bridle, the first thing I need to do is I need to focus, and then I can relax, and then I need to relax, and then I need to focus on I need to go to my understanding. Right. And that goes two ways, right? The horse can go to their own understanding because they already know what to do, or they need to listen to me to know what they need to do. Right. They need to listen to me for the guidance so they can understand what they need to do next. And then the fourth part of that is their balance, right? And then they need to adjust their balance appropriately. And I always use that with green horses advancing up, because the first thing is that when we're teaching a young colt, whether it's in a hackamore or a snaffle in a halter, is that when I take a hold of them, first thing they need to do is focus. The more that they focus, the more they can relax. The more that they relax, the more that we can teach them, the more that we can actually develop that understanding. And once they have better understanding, then we can get to the point of actually working on developing higher levels of balance, okay? More advanced levels of balance on how they need to carry themselves, okay? So for this guy, right, with Double Three Ranch, what I'd really be focused on is, okay, at how long does it take to get that horse's focus? And then does she relax or does she not relax? A lot of times in these types of situations, what happens is, and I've got a really sensitive little mare, and if the energy gets too high and you go to take a hold of her, she feels trapped up. Okay. She naturally just goes, oh, I get a little tight. Right. And so what I work with her on is saying, hey, when I pick up on you, good, you focus, but then you're like, get a little tight. It's like, no, 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 relax, breathe. Okay. And there's different ways that we need to go about handling that. If I'm in a training scenario and she gets a little tight, then I might hold weight and I may not add any more pressure, any more emotional energy. Like if he was just schooling a steer and he goes to take a hold of her and he say he's got his header and he can just say, tells the header, like, hey, just circle that steer for a second. Just let me kind of keep moving it around. And he can hold on the reins and wait until that horse starts to relax a little bit. And then he doesn't have to drop her completely out of the contact, but he can just do a little micro release with that mare. And in a training scenario of going, okay, there's the relaxation. And then depending on the situation, he could be done or he could go through and go, okay, now she's relaxed. She knows what to do. Let me drop this heel loop, sit down, and go through, right? Because if she doesn't relax, if the focus is there, but the relaxation doesn't come, then the tension, the body cannot get in alignment, right? Because if she's going to if her back tightens up, she's not going to be able to get her hind end underneath her to get a nice stop, right? If you take a hold of her and she doesn't focus as quickly as she needs to, right? And that means focus on what she needs to do. And you take a hold of her and she's just kind of leaning through it because she's too stuck on the cow, or her mind, maybe some horses might feel that contact. And if they feel trapped up, they might lean into it like, no, no, don't do that. Right. Then I would be schooling that part. I'd take a hold and we need to redefine the first thing that she needs to think about. It's like, hey, when I take a hold of you, I need you to focus. Right. I need you to come back and be soft. And so he's going back and fixing some of those holes in there. And then the other thing is the understanding, right? So if the horse is staying focused, the horse is pretty relaxed, and maybe they're just leaning or they're not actually getting their hind end up underneath them, then then I'd start kind of what we would say schooling on them a little bit. Then I might just sit down in the saddle, take my legs off of them, and may or may not say whoa, and I ask that horse to go to the ground and slide and stop. And if they don't, I'm just going to let my hand be steady. And if they keep going, she's going to run into the bit, and then I'm just going to sit there and wait. And the way that she's going to get the release is that she's going to figure out how to get her head, her neck, her shoulders, her barrel, and her hips aligned in that backup. And once she starts to back up and figure out how to get herself organized to where she finds that softness within the balance point that you want her to be in, then you say, hey, good job there. Like, really good job. Good job. And so that's how I'd be thinking about it. I'm a really big fan of flat work. So this is the last kind of tip I'm going to throw in here for you too, is if I'm just loping this horse around, right? Then I would do this at the trot too, but I want to talk about, like, if it's a speed and energy problem where it's like things get quick, then what I'd be doing is I'd lope her around, and then once she feels pretty good, then I take a hold of her and ask her to round up a little bit, and then ask her for that higher rate of speed. So get her soft first, then ask her to speed up a little bit, and kind of ride her up to the emotional or the energy level that before you ride her up to that ceiling of right before you feel like it's going to be too much, and let her hang out there. And when I say let her hang out there, is like, let her keep that rate of speed. Okay. So if you're loping around on a 4 and you're like, okay, I'm gonna get her soft, I'm gonna pick up on her, I'm gonna take her to a 5. She's good. 6, she's good. 7, she's good. 7.5, things start to rattle a little bit. She starts to get a little dodgy, starts to get a little heavy, kind of lean, she's losing that focus a little bit because the emotions are getting to her. Then just say, hey, just stay with her. Ask her to keep that pace and stay with her through that. And if she can stay with you, when she starts to settle in that at that 7.5, right? If she can start to settle in at that 7.5, let her settle in for a little bit. Like, and it might be settle in. It's hard to give you an exact distance, but you want to settle in enough to where she's like, she's good with it. Then rate her back. Maybe let her come to a jog or a walk and say, good job, Mare. Right. Because she's going to acknowledge that you acknowledge the fact that she had to work through some emotional side of things. Okay. But then taking her from that lope, getting her soft first, and then slowly increasing that emotional, that physical and emotional energy in there. That means that you're there to go ahead and help her. And you can feel when things start to get a little wobbly for her mind or even in her body. And you can be there to go, okay, no, I'm not going to add any bit more with that. Now, if you're at a 7.5 and she's going, and then she starts to go more nervous and more nervous and more nervous and more nervous, then I would rate it down, go to like a 7.4 or a 7.3, a 7.2, and find where she can settle. Find where she can settle in that and try to say that. Now, if you get to that point and she's going up and then she just goes haywire, right? And she just throws her face into the bit and is like, I can't handle this, right? Then you need to hit the brakes. You can do a couple of things. It depend on what you feel is most appropriate, right? You can either hit the brakes and back her up and say, no, 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 that's not what we're doing. Or it might be that if she feels really, and I would do that, like if she's going forward and maybe it's just a speed thing and the head's coming up, the chest is coming up, the rear end, the back is sinking, right? If the back is sinking on that horse because they're gaining speed and emotions are getting high, then their head gets high and their back drops. Then in that instance, I need to go to an exercise where what's the best exercise that I can do to get their back up and their head down? Well, backing up, right? Backing up is fantastic because what they have to do is they got to get their hips up underneath them. They got to pick their barrel up and they've got to drop their head to be able to back up in proper biomechanical form. Right. But if say the emotions got a little bit wild and she stays in a relatively decent position, but she's just getting nervous and anxious, and you can feel that their rib cage starts to get tight, they're not breathing like they should be, then I might start winding that horse down into some smaller circles to where I could get access with my inside leg to soften their inside rib cage. And I like to go to that rib cage with my leg because I can say, hey, I can feel that you're not breathing. You need to breathe. Breathing is beneficial, right? And I can slow it down. I can bring their awareness back to their body, and then I can let the emotions fizzle down. And once they're in a more steady state, then we can pick it back up and then just slowly increase from there. And so in this instance, right, I'd be going back to how does that horse think about the bit and how quickly does the horse respond? Because the most ideal circumstance for me is that it doesn't necessarily always take a physical contact. So if you're going to go to the heeling, if you're actually heeling on a run, that the horse will start to respond from the drape, from you starting to pull the slack out of that rein. But then the horse also has an understanding that say things get quick and busy like they do when you're roping, and you've got to really kind of take a hold of her, that she knows what to do with that, right? She can go, okay, I got you, man. And she's there for you. She drops her chin, she picks her shoulders up, and she just bears her rear end in the ground for you. And then at the end of it, you can say, hey, Mare, I really appreciate you. Like that wasn't ideal, but you were there for me. Well, we got to prepare them for that, right? We got to prepare them for that. If we do pick up on them a little quicker, a little more brash, that they know what to do with it. They doesn't get them frazzled emotionally or mentally, or just make them flat out upset, because it's not always going to be perfect. And so the first part of the foundation pieces is focus, relaxation, understanding, and balance. And then we went through how it would take her from where she is now, which is what I think about is like your rein cow horse circles, your reining circle, just loping, picking up, increasing speed. And then when they're increasing speed, letting her settle in that with the contact, because that seems to be where the issue is. And then what you'll be able to do then is increase the speed and eventually get her to where she can hang out a 7.5, 8.5, 10, 13 out of 10, and she can handle that with a contact, but then also you can get her running at that speed and pick up on her. Okay. So that's the second phase is one, pick up on her at a slower pace, get her up in that higher form, a higher level of energy, and be able to kind of coach her, but then also be able to, and I like to do that because we're able to coach them. We're able to communicate to them on a contact. Okay. Because and this is something that's really important, because I think some of you guys are like, well, you're not suggesting that he just goes and lopes this horse fast on a loose rein. All horses should be able to go gallop on a loose rein. But where he's having trouble with this particular horse is when the horse is going fast and he has to take a contact. Right. And that is something that has to be identified here, is that, yes, he should be able to run this horse wide open and the horse not just lose her shit. But also he needs to be able to, for this particular event too, he needs to be able to run her wide open and take a hold of her and her come back. And so you have both of those components: run her wide open on a loose rein, and then also then going in and getting her on a contact where you can communicate to her, hey, you're good, I'm here for you, this is to help you, this is to help you stay focused and relax and understand and stay in the right balance point, this is all here to help you, and we're going to do that while increasing the speed. All right. But one of my mentors had told me, like, speed is the enemy to balance, right? And we need balance at a high rate of speed, particularly when we're healing. So that means that we have to start slow, get the correct balance, and then slowly increase the speed that we need from our horses. And then, just like test driving a car, we're not going to go and just cram and jam. Like, we want to know at what point does the problem occur, then let the horse develop mentally and emotionally there, and then acknowledge her when she does that well. And that way that he can progress forward from that point. And yeah, so with that being said, y'all, this has been a solid Q&A. I hope that this has been super, super helpful for you guys. We're going to wrap it up really quickly. The only thing I ask is, if you haven't subscribed, if you haven't left us, if you're on YouTube, if you haven't subscribed or left a comment, please do. It really does help. Like, if you hit that like button, it does help more people find it. If you're listening to this on the podcast app and you think it deserves it, we'd really appreciate that 5-star review, and to write a quick review about why you like the podcast. People read those. They want to know that it's worth their time listening to. My goal is for this to be as valuable as possible to y'all. I'm very grateful for your time. And so if you're willing to do that, it helps us reach more horse people out there. I threw out a few resources today, and those will all the links will be available in the show notes below. So you can definitely get those as well. And anytime that you're listening, if you take a screenshot and you post it to your Instagram stories, your Facebook stories, and you tag us, you have to tag me. If you tag me at Colton Woods Horseman, then I'll get it notified and I can share it. And that also, I always love to hear, and you guys are listening to this, that you're getting value out of it, and love to get your feedback. And of course, if you have questions, if you're on YouTube, you can drop them in the comments of like, hey, I've got a question for a future episode. And if you want to email them to us, you can do that at office@coltonwoodshorsemanship.com. And you can also send them to us on social media, right? We're about everywhere. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, on the podcast, of course. And so, y'all, I hope you have an amazing, amazing rest of your week, and that this serves you on your journey, no matter when you're listening to it. And we look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode and on the next show. See y'all. Take care now.